Thank you. I told Bernie and Leo, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And today I come to you not as a dean, and I know you're dean at the Steinhardt School very well, we're buddies, but as a teacher. I've taught black students, many of whom were categorized as poor, from the kindergarten level to the doctoral level. And so my remarks today are informed by my experiences teaching this group of students. And I titled my remarks, Looking Beyond the Veil of No Excuses Schools, and I hope that this provides some fodder for our conversation. Of course, the news about Flint, Michigan, I don't believe is just about Flint, Michigan. There are many communities all across the nation that are being dangerously ignored and discarded. And we know that most of these communities are populated by the poor, who are disproportionately black and brown. Demographers tell us that in a mere 28 years, 2044, the majority of US citizens will be people of color. So I'm wondering about this question. What will it mean for American democracy and capitalism, if you believe in it, to have so many of the nation's future majority now living on the precarious edges of the social, economic, and political order, all the while witnessing urban redevelopment and investment, none of it meant for them? In many ways, where we live shapes what we think about ourselves. So what do children living in poverty, witnessing police violence and murders, learning about lead-poisoned water, attending rundown schools, seeing immigrants and the Muslim religion demonized in the news and popular movies, come to think of themselves, their families, the society and neighborhoods, the adults that permit these atrocities? And what do these same children think when their neighborhood is suddenly transformed with new grocery stores and farmers markets and hip bistros and high-rise condos with rooftop pools and new schools, none of them meant for them? Well, we've all seen this new urban renewal. This program unfolds in lockstep. You locate new businesses, typically a large specialty grocery store and coffee shops. You upgrade public services and protective police patrol. You build the high-end condos and apartment buildings. You raise public housing. You export the urban poor who are brown and black. You close the schools serving the minority poor and open newly restructured schools for the new white, more affluent residents. And if you're not sure that this equation is working, let me take you over to the intersection of 4th and M Street right here in Southwest Washington, D.C., where blocks of new development circle Syfax Homes, the area's remaining public housing project. From Syfax, the children who live there can walk past $500,000 and $1 million condos, a completely upgraded grocery store which contains a new coffee shop with a fireplace, boutique burger joints, and pet shops. The remarkable transformation of the grocery store alone, from poorly lit and sparsely stocked when it was primarily used by poor people, to a sparkling superstore with freshly baked breads and aisles of fruits and vegetables, most organic, for the new urban residents, is a story in and of itself. So what does all of this have to do? What does urban redevelopment have to do with the No Excuses School movement? First, I'd like us to glance behind the veil. No Excuses schools are deeply embedded in the urban school reform movement. And urban school reform, I believe, is not about schools or reform or kids. It's about land development and more other things, which I will discuss later in my remarks. The authors of The Color of School Reform affirm this in their study of school reform in Baltimore, Detroit, and Atlanta. They found, and I quote, many key figures promoting broad, efficiency-oriented reform initiatives for urban schools either lived in suburbs or sent their children to private schools. Second, local control of public schools through elected school boards is supposed to empower parents and community residents. However, this rarely happens, particularly in school districts serving urban, poor black students and brown students. Too often, predators eager to exploit schools for their own benefit short-circuit the work of deep and lasting school and community uplift. Mayoral control, Teach for America, education management organizations, venture capital funded charter schools have not, according to the research and commentary, garnered much grassroots support or enthusiasm among parents whose children actually attend urban schools. Because these parents, I believe, rightly view these schemes, and I use the word schemes purposely, as uninformed by their community and disconnected from the best interest of their children. In the most recent cases of Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Black parents and other community members point to school closings as verification of their distrust of school, quote unquote, reform efforts. We know that mayoral control has been linked to an emerging pattern of closing and disinvesting in schools that serve Black, brown, poor students, and reopening them as charters operated by education management organizations and oftentimes backed by venture capitalists. While mayoral control proposes to expand educational opportunity for Black and poor students, more often than not, new schools are placed in upper income gentrifying white areas of town. And while more schools are closed and fewer new schools are opened in lower income Black areas, this increases the level of educational inequity. Inner city residents report being suspicious of school reform, particularly when it's attached to neighborhood revitalization, which they view as an imposition from external moneyed elites who are exclusively committed to using schools to recalculate urban land values at the expense of inner city children, parents, and communities. Make no mistake about it. In my opinion, we are still fighting Brown. The nation is still fighting Brown. But we're not fighting it in the Supreme Court right now. We're fighting it on Wall Street. The moral imperative to support deep and lasting change in urban communities and reclaim public schools, it can't be driven by mayoral control. It can't be driven by anti-union, Black teacher displacing Teach for America, which populates schools serving Black, brown, and poor children with sociology and anthropology majors masquerading as teachers. And while TFAers have a missionary zeal to serve, the NAACP and the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund affirm that the missionary model has not been a friend to Black and brown people over the years. The Broad program is not the answer. As its model declares, their program is declare failure, then close schools in poor Black neighborhoods, turn schools over to the mayor or the governor and emergency management teams, and utilize our program superintendents to achieve this work. And deep and lasting change will not occur with the deep-pocketed venture capitalist-backed philanthropists who think they know what's best and push their ideas alone. And I won't name the names, but we could create a hashtag called #YouKnowTheNames, name them. Okay? But for those who are receiving the money, it's different to name the names. The nation, I believe, needs louder interrogation of the hand of the modern-day philanthropist in public education. We need louder interrogation and interruption of their motives and the end game. Think about this. The most prominent billionaires who are underwriting the no excuses school movement are a remarkably undiverse group. They do, however, find diverse acolyte pawns, program them, and provide all the money to start these charter networks. Note, back at home, their company's leadership is not diverse, and in most cases, their workforce is not diverse or unionized, and yet they fund quick draw school startups which can instantaneously create a public relations campaign using the face of Black, brown, and poor children and tear-jerking mission statements about their uplift. And yet these same billionaires can't use their billions to diversify their company's leadership and workforce or create jobs that benefit the communities captured in these cycles of poverty and neglect. Why is this so? Why can't they achieve this with their billions? There's more than 50 years of research indicating that concerted efforts to provide female heads of households meaningful employment opportunities would prevent hundreds of thousands of families from falling into poverty. We all know that once a family is in poverty, intractable poverty, their children are dramatically worse off in terms of options for quality school and the likelihood of high academic achievement. Why do we want to believe that venture-backed charter schools, that corporate America, that billionaires who are not friends of Black adults can rescue Black and brown children out of poverty through their venture capital-backed school networks with these highly programmed curricula. This is when you sit, black child. This is when you stand, brown child. This is when you look the uncertified Teach for America teacher in the eye, poor child. This is how you pass the standardized test. Oh no, not you, special needs child. We don't accommodate the differently abled. This is when you become a thought-controlled, submissive worker in the machine. And here's your slot, but it's not at my company. But when do you, black child, brown child, become educated, have time for curiosity and exploration and play, which Einstein says is the highest form of learning? When do you have time to heal from the violence that shapes contemporary poverty? When do you, black child, brown child, poor child, have time to flourish in a contemplative and nurturing school that is not programming you not to think? Quando? When? It's 2016. When? A glance behind the veil of no excuses schools reveals the strategy. The strategy is to use the truth to tell a lie. The truth centers on the shock and awe strategy that public schools are failing. And it is true that public schools have and are underserving children of color, particularly black children, and those living in poverty. The lie is that venture-backed charter schools are the answer. But what's the real end game of those with money and much of the power once they bust the unions, capture the nearly $1 trillion supporting public schools, and reduce public space, whether that's government or schools? I believe it's thought control. And I don't mean this in kind of an X-Files kind of way, but I believe it's thought control. There are some questions that I believe we must ask. Why aren't these billionaires creating jobs with their billions? Why are they tinkering with school management typologies and dictating curriculum scripts and scraping together instructional protocols? Why has TFA gone international? And more important, why is there no broad media interrogation of the billionaires' mass tinkering? Where are the MSNBC, Fox, PBS specials? Where? Well, the economic well-being of the nation's citizens and the vibrancy of its cities and schools, I believe, must be inspired by our collective will to eradicate the isolation and ills of poverty as our starting point. I think that children are learning and watching from us, and the black, brown, and poor children who are experiencing these realities now will soon be the nation's majority.